I never raised my voice when my daughter threw my war medals in the trash. She stood there in her designer heels, arms crossed, looking at me like I was already dead, and said, "Those dusty old things are worthless, Dad. Just like your stories." Then she dropped them into the kitchen bin. Bronze clinked against plastic. A lifetime of service hit coffee grounds and banana peels. I didn't shout. I didn't move. I didn't beg. Because when someone shows you exactly who they are, the smartest thing you can do is watch, wait, and remember. And what happened next destroyed her life in front of everyone she tried to impress. But before I tell you how a quiet Sunday afternoon in Southern California turned into the most ruthless lesson my family ever learned, take a second to support this channel. Tap subscribe and tell me in the comments what time it is where you're watching from right now. All right, let me take you back. Sunday afternoon in Monterey Bay used to be my favorite part of the week. The air always smelled like salt and eucalyptus, and the ocean breeze carried the sound of waves rolling against the cliffs below my back deck. I'd lived in that house for over 3 decades, ever since I retired from my work as a private security trainer. I bought it with overtime pay, skipped vacations, and a lot of discipline learned the hard way. That day should have been peaceful. Instead, I was sitting in my living room with my grandchildren, Maya and Ethan, trying to get a pass on something that mattered. I laid my medals out carefully on the coffee table. A silver star, a Purple Heart, an Army Commendation Medal, campaign ribbons from a war most people only knew from movies. They weren't worth much money, but they carried weight no safe could measure. Maya, 19 years old, barely glanced up from her phone. Her acrylic nails clicked against the screen as she scrolled, dressed like she was heading to a photo shoot instead of sitting in her grandfather's home. "So, you really jumped out of helicopters?" she asked, half interested. "Rappelled," I corrected gently, lifting the Purple Heart. "Mostly outside Chulai. Took shrapnel from a mortar." "Cool," Ethan muttered, 16 years old. Hood up, eyes glued to his screen. He hadn't looked me in the eye in months. "Did you kill anyone?" he asked flatly. "Like how many?" I set the medal down slowly. "War isn't a game, son." He shrugged. "Whatever." He turned his phone toward his sister. "Check out this sports car I'm going to get once Mom's business takes off." That's when the front door slammed open. My daughter Lydia swept in like a storm, heels snapping against the hardwood floor. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, jewelry that probably cost more than my first car. "Dad, we need to talk." "Now." I stayed seated. Old habits. Observe before reacting. "I need $25,000 today," she said. Maya and Ethan both looked up instantly. Money always got their attention. "That's a lot," I said calmly. "What's it for?" She scoffed. "Does it matter? It's an emergency." Emergencies usually come with explanations. Her jaw tightened. "I don't have time for this. Are you going to help your own daughter or not?" I looked at her. Really looked. She was 44 years old, standing in my living room like she owned it. And somehow, the little girl I once taught how to ride a bike was gone. Not without knowing why. That's when she snapped. "You sit in this huge house, hoarding money, clinging to the past," she shouted. "Living off war stories nobody cares about." She gestured toward the table. "These," she laughed, "is trash from a war that ended half a century ago." Before I could stand, she swept her arm across the table. The medals scattered. Maya gasped. Ethan smirked. Lydia walked into the kitchen and dumped them into the trash. Metal hit plastic. There it was. Silence filled the room. I didn't react, because in my life, I learned something important. The most dangerous moment is when emotion tells you to move. She wanted me to explode, to beg, to break. I didn't give her that. She shifted, suddenly uneasy. "Fine," she snapped. "Be stubborn. But don't come crying to me when you're alone with nothing but memories." She turned to the kids. "Let's go." Maya hesitated, something flickering across her face. Ethan laughed. "Later, Gramps." The door slammed. The picture of my late wife rattled on the mantel. I waited 10 full minutes. Then I walked to the kitchen, reached into the trash, and retrieved every metal. Coffee grounds, food scraps. No dignity left, but still mine. I washed them carefully, dried them, lined them back up on the table. That night, as the sun bled orange into the Pacific, something inside me changed. Not anger, clarity, because I finally understood the truth. My home wasn't safe anymore, and my daughter wasn't just disrespectful. She was dangerous. I sat on my back deck that night long after the sun disappeared. The Pacific below me rolled in the same slow rhythm it always had, indifferent to family drama, indifferent to betrayal. The sky faded from orange to deep blue, and the wind carried that familiar salt smell I'd known for most of my adult life. I bought that house 32 years earlier, right after I retired from training private security teams. Every board, every nail, every mortgage payment was earned the hard way. I wanted something solid, something that would outlast me. A legacy. Now my daughter lived there rent-free. Her husband treated it like a hotel, and my grandchildren acted like I was an inconvenience they were forced to tolerate. And somehow I had allowed it. The old version of me would have made excuses. She's stressed. They're young. Family helps family. But when those metals hit the trash, something cold and precise snapped into focus. I wasn't being generous. I was being harvested. They'd moved in almost 3 years earlier. Lydia had shown up at my door with red eyes and a practiced tremble in her voice. Her husband, Marcus, stood behind her in an expensive suit that didn't match the story he was telling. "Just until we get back on our feet," she'd said. "A few months, Dad. That's all." I said yes without hesitation. What kind of father wouldn't? At first, it looked reasonable. Marcus claimed an investment deal had collapsed. Lydia said she was restructuring her consulting business. The kids needed stability. Temporary became comfortable very quickly. By the second month, Lydia started asking questions about my finances. "You're on a fixed income, Dad," she'd said, flipping through my mail without asking. "You should really be more careful." I ignored the red flag. By the fourth month, she redecorated my living room. Furniture my late wife had chosen vanished overnight. "This stuff is outdated," Lydia said cheerfully. "People will think you're struggling." By the sixth month, she was opening my bank statements. Just organizing, she claimed. Helping. By the end of the first year, the requests began. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, then weekly, then urgent. I'd given her nearly $40,000 without keeping track. Marcus was worse. He used my truck without asking, borrowed my tools. My garage slowly emptied. One afternoon, I found him loading my professional-grade equipment into his car. "Just borrowing these," he said, grinning. "You hardly use them anyway." The kids followed suit. Maya treated my home like a backdrop for her social media, filming videos in rooms that held memories she didn't care about. Ethan called me Boomer every time I asked him to lower the music or help around the house. "Typical Boomer," he'd sneer, living in the past. And every time I mentioned my service, I minimized it. "They're young. They don't understand." It's different now. Standing alone in my kitchen that night, staring at my reflection in the dark window, I finally said it out loud. They were using me, systematically. And worse, they were getting bolder. The next morning, my coffee tasted like metal. I couldn't focus on the newspaper. My mind kept replaying moments I dismissed, patterns I'd refused to see. Lydia called twice. I let go to voicemail. The third time I answered. "Dad, about yesterday," she said quickly. "I was stressed, but I still need the money. The situation hasn't changed." "Later," I said. "What? Later? Why decide it's urgent?" I hung up. My hands were steady. In a service, we had a saying, "The mission starts when you stop reacting." I walked into my study and opened the metal lockbox I kept hidden behind old manuals. The house deed still in my name. Bank accounts still mine. Investments. Vehicle titles. Insurance policies. Everything was still legally under my control. But for how long? That's when my training kicked in. Reconnaissance. Observe. Wait. Gather intelligence. I stopped confronting. Stopped arguing. Stopped explaining. And I started watching. 2 days later, my neighbor Frank Delgado waved me over while trimming his hedges. Frank was 74, retired bank auditor. Sharp eyes. Sharper instincts. Strange thing, he said quietly. Saw your daughter at Pacific Coast Bank yesterday, talking pretty intensely with a branch manager. That's so. Yeah, something about account access. He kept telling her privacy laws wouldn't allow it. My stomach tightened. Thought you should know, Frank added. Also heard your son-in-law talking on his phone. Mentioned selling an old coastal property in a few months. My house. I thanked him and went back inside. The picture was coming together. That evening, Lydia texted me. Dad, we should talk about power of attorney. Just to protect you. You're not getting any younger. Power of attorney. Control. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. Sure, we can talk about it soon. She thought she was winning. She didn't realize the board had shifted. That night, I pulled out a notebook. Dates. Amounts. Conversations. A map formed. They weren't planning to leave. They were planning to take over. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My home wasn't just a house anymore. It was hostile territory. Once I stopped confronting them, things changed. Not on the surface. On the surface, everything looked normal. Lydia still swept through the house like she owned it. Marcus still drank my coffee and borrowed my things. The kids still ignored me unless money came up. But beneath that routine, I could feel the tension tightening. Predators grow impatient when prey stops reacting. I started small. I paid closer attention to Lydia's schedule. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she left the house mid-morning dressed like she was heading to a gala instead of working from home, as she liked to call it. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, perfect makeup. Client meetings, she'd say vaguely. One Tuesday, I decided to see for myself. I followed her truck at a distance I'd learned decades earlier, never too close, never obvious. She pulled into an upscale cafe overlooking the marina. Through the window, I watched her sit across from a man in an expensive suit, papers spread between them. They leaned in close. Too comfortable. I took photos. Quietly. Methodically. Evidence. When I got home, I did something I hadn't done in years. I searched my own house. In the printer tray, buried under Lydia's paperwork, I found it. A partially completed power of attorney document. My name typed neatly at the top. Lydia listed as attorney in fact. Full authority over financial and legal decisions. The document wasn't signed yet, but it was ready, waiting. I photographed every page and put it back exactly where I found it. Reconnaissance rule. Never let them know you've been there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from clarity. The next morning, I drove across town and rented a safety deposit box under my name alone. I moved every critical document into it: deeds, records, service papers, financial statements. The bank manager looked at me and nodded. Precautionary measures? She asked. Exactly, I said. Then I upgraded my home security. Motion-activated cameras. Cloud backup. Every common area covered. All legal. All discreet. Marcus barely noticed. Good idea, he said, scrolling his phone. Neighborhoods changing. Yes, it was. 3 days later, the cameras paid for themselves. I was in my study watching the live feed when Lydia and Marcus sat in the living room, thinking they were alone. He's dragging his feet on the paperwork, Lydia said, pacing. So we push harder, Marcus replied. He won't last forever. He's stubborn, she snapped. Doesn't matter. Once we get control, the house is gone. We deserve it more than he does. I saved the file, backed it up. Then I heard Maya on the phone later that week. Grandpa's loaded, she laughed. Once Mom gets the house, I'm finally getting that luxury SUV. Ethan wasn't any better. My mom says he'll sign everything over soon. he bragged to a friend. Old people get confused. I recorded everything. That's when I made the call. Helen Cross, property attorney. Downtown office. Sharp mind. No patience for excuses. I laid everything out. She listened carefully, flipping through photos, notes, recordings. This is elder financial exploitation, she said flatly. And it's escalating. What are my options? She didn't hesitate. We secure your assets immediately. New will, living trust, and eviction. Eviction. The word felt heavy, but necessary. Yes, I said. I want them gone. She nodded. Then we proceed legally. Cleanly. Permanently. I paid her nearly $6,000 without blinking. Walking out of her office, I felt lighter than I had in years. That weekend, while organizing old files, I found something else. A glossy brochure. Patriots Forward Foundation. Smiling photos of Lydia in front of American flags. Elegant wording. Donation links everywhere. Founded by Lydia Hayes to honor her veteran father. Honor. I searched public records. The foundation had raised over $400,000. Program expenses? Barely $50,000. Administrative costs swallowed the rest. Luxury purchases. Travel. Jewelry. My service wasn't just disrespected. It was being monetized. My phone buzzed. Lydia texted. Family dinner tonight. 6 sharp. Don't be late. I stared at the screen. I finally understood the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about my house. This was fraud, and she was about to celebrate it in public. I typed back, I'll be there, because now I wasn't just watching. I was planning. Once I saw the foundation brochure, I couldn't put it down. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of print you don't choose unless you're trying to impress donors with money to burn. Lydia's smile was everywhere at podiums, shaking hands, posing beside flags and stage veterans she probably couldn't name. Patriots Forward Foundation, helping those who served. I sat in my study long past midnight, scrolling through public records and archive filings. Nonprofit tax documents don't lie if you know how to read them. Over $450,000 raised in just under 4 years. Less than $60,000 spent on actual veteran assistance. The rest? Administrative costs, consulting fees, travel reimbursements. I trained corporate security teams on fraud detection for years. I knew this playbook. Charity scams don't start big. They grow quietly, feeding on emotion and trust. And Lydia had learned how to sell emotion very well. The next morning, the house felt different. Lydia was humming in the kitchen, unusually cheerful. Marcus lounged at the counter, sipping my coffee like he'd won something. Big week coming up, Lydia said lightly. The foundation's gala planning is almost finished. Gala? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled. Formal event. Grand hotel. Donors. Press. Press. That explained the brochure. When is it? I asked. Into next month, she said. You probably wouldn't enjoy it. Very upscale. Translation. Don't show up. I nodded. Sound nice. She relaxed instantly. That's when I knew arrogance had blinded her. I made another call that afternoon. Raymond Holt, former federal auditor. We'd crossed paths years earlier on a corporate investigation. I laid out what I'd found. He was quiet for a long moment. This isn't sloppy, he finally said. It's structured. If you're right, this crosses into criminal territory. I want it documented, I said. Everything. My fee won't be cheap. I know. It cost me over $9,000, but some truths are worth paying for. While Raymond worked, I kept watching. The cameras captured more than I expected. Lydia on the phone in the kitchen. Once the next funding round hits, we'll be set. He has no idea. Marcus in the garage. We just need a doctor willing to say he's not fully competent. That one made my blood run cold. They weren't just planning to take my money. They were planning to erase me. I saved the files, backed them up twice. Raymond's report arrived 2 weeks later. Over 100 violations, misuse of donor funds, false program reporting, personal expenses disguised as charity work. Any law enforcement review this, he said, and they won't walk away. That's when I made my final call. Clara Benson, investigative journalist, old friend, sharp instincts. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. This will destroy her. It should, I said. I'll need time, she warned. And confirmation. You'll have it. Meanwhile, Lydia escalated. She cornered me in the hallway one evening. Dad, we really need to finalize that power of attorney. I'm thinking about it. Her smile vanished. You're being difficult. Maybe, I said, but it's my difficulty. She stormed off. Marcus tried charm the next day. Pops, ever think about maximizing your assets? You deserve to enjoy life. I already am, I replied. His eyes hardened for a split second before the grin returned. The masks were slipping. Good. By the time the gala invitations arrived, everything was ready. The event was scheduled at a luxury hotel overlooking the bay. Over 500 guests expected. A $500,000 fundraising announcement planned. A stage, a microphone, and an audience that believed in her lie. I laid everything out on my desk. Audit reports, financial records, video files, Clara's draft article. The plan was simple. Let her speak. Let her lie. Then tell the truth. Slowly, clearly, publicly. Because respect isn't demanded. It's proven. And when you throw it in the trash, there's a price. Once the gala invitations went out, everything accelerated. That's how these people always give themselves away. When they believe victory is close, they stop being careful. The invitation arrived in a thick ivory envelope, embossed lettering, gold trim. Patriots Forward Foundation Annual Benefit Gala. Black tie optional. Oceanfront Grand Hotel. A handwritten note from Lydia was tucked inside. Dad, this is a big night for me. Please don't make it awkward. I smiled when I read it. She still thought awkwardness was my greatest threat. 2 days later, I met with Helen Cross again. She reviewed Raymond's audit, my recordings, the power of attorney draft, and the financial timeline I'd built. This is overwhelming, she said. No judge will ignore this. What's our next step? She slid a folder across the desk. Eviction filing. Immediate. You've given them more than reasonable time, and you have documented exploitation. I opened the folder. Legal language. Dates. Evidence attached. Court date. I asked. 2 weeks after the gala. Perfect. File it, I said. She didn't flinch. That evening, Lydia noticed a shift. She found the notice on the kitchen counter. You're evicting us? She whispered, stunned. You were temporary, I said calmly. It's been nearly 3 years. You can't do this, she snapped. We're family. Family doesn't plan to declare someone incompetent to steal their home. Her face drained of color. You've been spying on us. I've been listening, I corrected. In my own house. Marcus stormed and later, fists clenched. You think you're clever, he said. This will drag on for years. Maybe, I replied, but you won't be here. For the first time, he looked unsure. The pressure mounted daily. Lydia snapped at caterers on the phone, screamed at vendors, rehearsed her speech out loud at night, pacing the living room like a general before battle. My father, a decorated veteran, taught me the meaning of service she practiced. The lie didn't even slow her down anymore. Marcus drank more. Maya complained constantly about seating charts and outfits. Ethan bragged to his friends that their lives were about to level up. None of them noticed me preparing. I took my dress uniform to the cleaners. The woman behind the counter handled it with care. Vietnam service? She asked softly. Yes. My uncle didn't come back, she said. Thank you. That mattered more than she knew. Clara called the following week. I've spoken to 14 donors, she said. One sold property to donate. Another gave a spouse's life insurance. Can you prove misuse? I have receipts, travel records, credit card statements. Then it's ready. Once this runs, she warned, there's no undoing it. I'm not trying to undo anything, I said. I'm finishing it. Raymond called next. Final audit is complete. 120 documented violations. Prosecutable. Will it hold? In court? Absolutely. The house grew tense. Lydia cornered me one last time. Don't come to the gala, she said sharply. You'll embarrass yourself. Understand, I replied. She relaxed. Good. She never asked what I understood. The night before the gala, I laid everything out. Uniform pressed, medals polished, 3 backup drives, printed reports, phone fully charged. I looked at an old photo on my desk. My unit, young faces. 10 never made a home. I survived for a reason. Tomorrow, that reason would become clear. The morning of the gala arrived calm and clear. Too calm. The ocean outside my window rolled in slow, steady waves, the way it always had, the way it would long after family names and scandals faded into memory. I woke before sunrise, made my coffee, and sat on the deck watching pelicans dive for fish like nothing in the world was about to change. Inside the house, chaos brewed. Lydia was already on her phone by 7, pacing barefoot across the kitchen tile, snapping orders at people who couldn't push back. No, the flowers are wrong. They're blush, not champagne. I don't care what it costs. Fix it. Yes, the ice sculpture stays. It makes a statement. Marcus stumbled in late morning, sunglasses on, nursing a drink disguised as juice. This is it, he said with a grin. Tonight changes everything. Lydia didn't smile. She was too focused, too convinced of her own brilliance. Don't jinx it, she snapped. Everything has to be perfect. Maya drifted through wearing a silk robe, complaining about her makeup appointment. What time do I need to be camera ready? 5, Lydia said. Hair at 3. That's so early. Ethan tracked dirt through the hallway, asking if he could bring a friend. No, Lydia barked. This is a serious event. I sat quietly in my chair, reading the paper. Invisible. Exactly how they liked me. Around noon, Lydia finally noticed me. You're in my way, she said sharply. Phone pressed her ear. I'm sitting, I replied. You know what I mean? She lowered her voice. Tonight, don't come. This isn't your scene. I wasn't planning to. She blinked. Suspicious. Really? Yes. Relief washed over her face. Good. Thank you for being reasonable for once. Reasonable. That word tasted strange after everything. That afternoon, I heard her rehearsing upstairs. My father, a true American hero, inspired this foundation she practiced. His sacrifice taught me the value of service. Each word was polished, empty, profitable. I walked past her door without stopping. Dinner was brief, intense. Marcus toasted loudly. To 500,000 raised tonight. Lydia shot him a warning look. Maya laughed. Can we finally move after this? Yes, Lydia said, glancing at me. Soon. Ethan leaned back. How much is Grandpa's house worth anyway? Enough, Marcus said. Enough for all of us. I finished my meal and stood. Good luck tonight, I said. They didn't hear the finality in my voice. Once alone, I closed my bedroom door and laid everything out one last time. Dress uniform, medals aligned carefully, audit reports, Clara's article, recordings queued. My phone buzzed. Clara, media is in position. Raymond, audit copies ready. Helen, Attorney General representatives confirmed. I replied with one message. 7:45. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. An old man, they thought. They forgot what old soldiers are trained to do. By 7:15 that evening, the ballroom at the oceanfront Grand Hotel glowed like a jewel box. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, hundreds of guests in formal wear. Cameras everywhere. I stood just outside the doors, listening. Applause. Lydia's voice carried clearly. Thank you for joining us tonight to honor those who served. She sounded confident, untouchable. I adjusted my jacket. The metals caught the light. When the coordinator tried to stop me, I met her eyes. Vietnam veteran, I said quietly. Her expression softened instantly. Of course. Welcome. The doors opened. The applause was still echoing when I stepped into the ballroom. 200 people stood, clapping, smiling, raising their phones as Lydia basked in the moment she'd rehearsed 100 times. Chandeliers glittered above her. Banners stretched behind the stage. Bold letters promising honor, service, sacrifice. She saw me halfway down the aisle. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Her smile froze. Her shoulders stiffened. Her eyes widened just enough for panic to leak through. But she was trapped. Too many eyes. Too many cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, she said quickly, forcing a laugh. What a surprise. My father, the inspiration for everything we do. The crowd turned. Then they noticed the uniform, the medals. The applause shifted warmer, louder, more genuine. I felt it wash over me, not as pride, but as something steadier. Respect. Real respect. The kind that isn't bought with brochures. Speech, someone called. I climbed the steps slowly. Lydia handed me the microphone with trembling fingers. Thank you, I said calmly. Thank you for coming tonight to support veterans. The room quieted. That's why I need to tell you the truth. A murmur rippled through the crowd. For the past several years, this foundation has raised over $450,000. People nodded, smiled. You were told this money would help veterans with housing, counseling, and support. I paused. That was a lie. Gasps, whispers, confusion. Lydia lunged forward. Dad, stop. You're confused. Only about 1/10 of that money ever reached veterans, I continued. The rest paid for luxury travel, jewelry, vehicles, and personal expenses. This is slander, she shouted. He's not well. I turned slightly. Mr. Raymond Holt, I said. Would you stand, please? Raymond rose from the front row, holding a thick bound report. I'm a former federal auditor, he said clearly. I conducted a full forensic review of this foundation. The findings support everything Mr. Morrison has stated. Cameras flashed. Lydia staggered backward. I continued. Ms. Clara Benson from the Tribune is here. She has spoken to donors who lost life insurance funds, retirement savings, and inheritances. Clara stood. I have receipts, travel records, and credit card statements, she said. This is documented fraud. The room erupted. Donors shouted. Chairs scraped. Security moved uncertainly. Marcus tried to slip toward the exit. 2 people stepped forward, blocking him. California Attorney General's office, one announced. Please remain where you are. Lydia collapsed into a chair. No, she whispered. Please. Dad. I walked to her and knelt so only she could hear me. Respect isn't thrown in the trash, I said quietly. And lies don't survive daylight. I stood and handed the microphone back. Then I walked out. The doors closed behind me, and the noise stayed inside. It didn't leak out through the glass. It didn't chase me down the steps. It didn't cling to my clothes the way it had so many other nights. The hotel swallowed it whole, shouting, accusations, the manic click of cameras, and the breathless urgency of people who thrived on spectacle. All of it folded inward, trapped behind polished brass handles and security guards who suddenly knew exactly where to stand. Outside, the night received me without judgment. Cool air brushed my face, carrying the sharp tang of salt up from the bay. It was steady and familiar, the same breath the ocean had been exhaling every evening of my life here. A constant presence, unimpressed by human drama, patient enough to wait us all out. I stood on the hotel steps longer than I needed to. The concrete was cool through the soles of my shoes. My hands hung loose at my sides, fingers flexing once, then stilling. My chest rose and fell in a way that finally felt natural. For years, my body had forgotten how to stand down. Shoulders always tight, jaw locked, breath shallow, clipped, as if the next impact was inevitable. That night, something unclenched. Not all at once, not dramatically, just a subtle release, like a muscle easing after being held too long. I hadn't realized how constant the tension had been until it was gone. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Behind those doors, Lydia was still shouting, performing outrage like it was oxygen. Her voice had always carried that way, sharp and rehearsed, calibrated for maximum effect. Marcus was probably still posturing, trying to calculate angles, exits, narratives. He'd always believed there was a way out of every situation if you were clever enough, ruthless enough, fast enough. The cameras would keep rolling until they got their fill of spectacle. But the truth didn't need an audience anymore. It was already free. I walked down the steps and into the night, shoes clicking against concrete that had borne my weight for decades. The city lights glittered against the dark water, broken into fragments by the gentle chop of the bay. Somewhere, a gull cried a sharp, lonely sound that cut cleanly through the air. Somewhere else, laughter spilled from a bar patio, careless and alive. Life went on, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could let it. The fallout came fast. Truth has a way of doing that once it's no longer contained. By morning, Lydia's foundation website was offline. The home page, once a carefully curated display of smiling veterans, patriotic slogans, and glossy impact statements, now returned only an error message. The kind that feels abrupt, almost rude. Donation portals froze mid-transaction. Payment processors suspended accounts pending investigation. Social media profiles that had once been aggressively moderated, scrubbed clean of dissent, were locked or wiped entirely. Screenshots, of course, live forever. They circulated quietly at first, then louder. Captured posts, deleted testimonials, archive pages that told a different story than the one Lydia had sold so convincingly for years. Clara's headline hit just after dawn. Veteran charity under investigation for fraud. It was precise, unembellished, relentless. No adjectives to argue with. No speculation to deflect. Just facts laid out in a way that dared anyone to deny them. By noon, every local outlet had picked it up. By evening, regional stations followed. Reporters who had once been waved away by Lydia's PR team smiling apologies. Vague promises of future access now dug eagerly into public records, donor testimonials, and the audit Raymond had compiled with almost surgical care. That audit moved like wildfire through regulatory circles. Numbers don't shout. They don't posture. They don't threaten lawsuits or cry persecution. They don't lie. They simply sit there, patient and devastating, daring you to explain them away. Line items that didn't add up. Transfers that made no operational sense. Administrative costs bloated beyond plausibility. Restricted donations quietly rerouted. Grants announced with fanfare and never fully dispersed. By the end of the week, formal charges were filed. Fraud, tax violations, wire misrepresentation. Marcus was named alongside her. That surprised no one who had paid attention. The totals were worse than even I had expected. Over $500,000 misused. Dozens of donors deceived. Lives disrupted in ways spreadsheets could only hint at. Scholarship funds diverted. Emergency housing grants rerouted. Counseling programs advertised but never fully staffed. Behind every neat column of figures was a human being who had trusted her. A widow who donated her late husband's life insurance payout, because she believed it would help someone else survive what he hadn't. A veteran who gave $10 a month because it made him feel like he still belonged to something that mattered. A family who organized a fundraiser after burying their son, clinging to the idea that his death could mean hope for someone else. Trust is a currency that doesn't replenish easily. The law moved the way it always does, slowly, then all at once. First came the freezes. Accounts locked, assets flagged, transactions halted midstream. Then the subpoenas, boxes of documents, hard drives, email archives that no amount of spin could soften. Then the interviews. Phones rang late into the night. Emails went unanswered. Lawyers replaced spokespeople. Excuses collapsed under scrutiny. For the first time, Lydia couldn't talk her way out of the room. The eviction hearing happened quietly. No cameras, no speeches, no dramatics. Just a small courtroom that smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant. The kind of room where decisions were made without applause or outrage, only procedure, precedent, and the steady rhythm of due process. The judge reviewed the evidence. Property records, financial documents, proof of misrepresentation. Each piece slid into place with a dull, inevitable weight. 30 days to vacate. The gavel fell with a sound that felt heavier than any shout Lydia had ever thrown at me. She didn't look at me once. Her gaze stayed fixed ahead, jaw tight, lips pressed into a thin line that suggested restraint rather than remorse. Marcus stared at the floor, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. For the first time, he looked smaller than the space he occupied, compressed by consequences he could no longer negotiate. The kids weren't there. I was grateful for that. Some truths shouldn't be absorbed that early, that publicly. Some lessons deserve distance and time. When it ended, there was no rush of triumph, no surge of adrenaline, no sense of conquest, just a deep, steady quiet that settled into my bones. I didn't feel victory. I felt finality. Some endings aren't meant to feel good. They're meant to feel complete. A week later, the house was silent again. Not the brittle silence of tension, but the genuine absence of noise. No shouting ricocheting down hallways. No rehearsed speeches delivered to imaginary audiences. No entitlement echoing through rooms that had once held too many memories layered on top of each other. The walls seemed to exhale. I moved through the room slowly, not to reminisce, to reclaim. Each step was deliberate. Each breath was mine. I opened windows that had been kept shut too long. Let the ocean air roll through, lifting dust and stale resentment alike. On the back deck, I laid my medals out beside me. Bronze, purple, silver. They caught the late afternoon light, edges worn smooth by time and handling. They weren't pristine. They weren't decorative. They were reminders of moments when fear had been acknowledged and action taken anyway. I cleaned them carefully, not out of vanity, out of respect. Clean, whole, earned. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in deep orange and violet. The ocean answered with its steady rhythm, the same rhythm that had carried me through war, through work, through loss, and now through justice. Waves didn't judge. They didn't care. They simply returned, again and again. I thought about the donors, the widows, the veterans, the families who trusted her lies. I wondered how many of them would ever get back what they lost. Some funds would be recovered, some programs rebuilt, but trust was harder. And I thought about something my commander once told me after a mission went bad. We were sitting on overturned crates, gears still on, sweat cooling into something like regret. The air had been heavy with what-ifs. Honor isn't about being perfect, he'd said. It's about standing up when it counts. At the time, I hadn't fully understood. Now I did. The calls came over the next few days. Clara first. The article won an award, she said, her voice carrying equal parts disbelief and satisfaction. And the Attorney General's office is expanding the investigation. Good, I replied. No celebration, no bitterness, just acknowledgement. Raymond messaged the next day. They're using the audit as a training case. I smiled at that. He would appreciate the irony precision becoming legacy. Helen dropped by once more, carrying a small bag of groceries I didn't need, but accepted anyway. You did the right thing, she said, meeting my eyes without hesitation. Even when it was hard. I nodded, especially because it was hard. She squeezed my arm before leaving, a simple gesture that carried more weight than any speech. That night, I poured a glass and stepped back onto the deck. The ocean stretched out before me, vast and indifferent and eternal. I raised a glass. To honor, I said quietly. Not the kind printed on banners. Not the kind shouted into microphones. The kind you live. The waves rolled in, uncaring but constant. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally home. Time has a way of settling things. Weeks passed after the gala, and then months. The headlines faded, replaced by newer scandals and louder noise. That's how the world works. It moves on quickly, even from things that feel life-altering when you're standing inside them. But inside my house, the quiet stayed. At first, it felt strange. Too much space. Too much silence. I'd grown used to footsteps, slammed doors, raised voices, music vibrating through walls that were never meant to carry that much resentment. Now, mornings returned to how they used to be. I woke before sunrise, brewed my coffee strong, sat on the deck wrapped in a light jacket, watching fog roll in from the Pacific and burn off slowly as the sun climbed. Pelicans dove. Waves broke against the rocks below. The world kept its rhythm. That mattered to me, because when everything else falls apart, what remains tells you what was real. The legal process dragged on, as it always does. Lydia's case moved from shock to denial to panic. Marcus tried to negotiate, tried to spin stories, tried to minimize. The evidence didn't care. Charges stuck. Plea deals were discussed. Assets were frozen. Properties seized. The foundation was permanently dissolved, its remaining funds redirected to legitimate veteran organizations under court supervision. Some donors got partial restitution. Not all. You can't always fix damage after it's done, but you can stop it from continuing. That's something. I heard from Maya once. A short message. I didn't know how bad it was. I'm sorry. I replied simply. Learn from it. That's all that matters now. Ethan never reached out. Maybe someday he will. Maybe he won't. I've learned that closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. One afternoon, I took the medals down to the local veteran center. Not to give them away, just to show them. A few younger vets gathered around as I laid them out on the table. They asked questions. Real ones. What was it like? How did you cope afterward? What kept you going? I told them the truth. That courage isn't loud. That strength doesn't always look like anger. That sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stand firm without raising your voice. One of them looked at the Purple Heart and said quietly, "Thank you for not letting them turn this into a joke." I nodded, because that was the point all along. On the anniversary of my wife's passing, I placed her photo back on the mantle where it belonged. The house felt like hers again, like ours. I realized something then. Legacy isn't money. It isn't property. It isn't even medals. Legacy is what you refuse to let be corrupted, what you protect when it would be easier to surrender. Some evenings, I still sit on the deck with a beer, watching the sky burn orange and purple as the sun sinks into the sea. The medals rest on the table beside me, catching the last light of day. They were never trash. They were proof. Proof that patience can outlast cruelty. That truth survives performance. That respect, once lost, is nearly impossible to reclaim. And proof that even late in life, you can still draw a line and say, no further. This ends here. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Some lessons take a lifetime to learn. Others arrive the moment someone throws your honor in the trash.